In today's episode, you're about to discover what happened to our various property markets last month, what's changing in our property market that's caused so many banks to completely reverse their predictions for the property market, and number three, the new objection, the new thing that people are putting out there to perhaps scare you or deter you from getting into the property market. So if that's what you want to find out more about, stay tuned. Hi, it's Nero here, and let's begin by looking at the CoreLogic data for what happened to our various property markets. Sydney prices last month rose by 1.3%, slightly lower than the 1.4% growth that we saw in March, but still significant. I mean, if you annualize this, so that means that if month on month for the next 12 months, property prices were to grow on average by 1.3% each month, you would see an annual growth rate of somewhere around 15.5%. Quite significant. Melbourne last month essentially stayed flat, slight increase of 0.1%. Brisbane, including the Gold Coast, rose 0.5%. Adelaide, 0.2%. And Perth, 0.6%. So if we look at the five major capital cities, according to CoreLogic, the average growth rate last month was 0.7%, which is certainly significant. So for many of our capital cities, that now means that we've had 2 months of continued growth in the property market. And for the first time in April, the median house price nationally increased, causing even some of the biggest skeptics to start saying, are we now at the start of the next growth phase? Have a look at this. Cautious signs of recovery. Australia's median house price rises for the first time in a year, despite punishing rate rises. Australia's wild housing market pendulum has finally steadied, swinging back from a period of steep price decline with the first price increases in nearly a year across the country. Experts have greeted the new data from the latest Domain House Price Report released on Thursday as evidence that the market has already bottomed and a period of relative stability and gradual price rises is on its way. That's good news for both buyers and sellers because it shows a stabilization of market conditions, and that's what we all want, said Domain's Chief of Research and Economics. Westpac team economics head Dr. Bill Evans agrees with the findings, saying that the housing market price falls are now mostly over and prices are showing promising signs of stabilization. The 10% fall we have seen since April last year has bottomed out since February, with those minor increases in March and April, Evans said. Now that was Westpac, and even ANZ have come out and changed their view on the property market. But remember, just a few short months ago, lenders like ANZ were predicting an 18% price fall, right? And even 20% in Sydney. So they were expecting the market to completely crash. But what's caused this quite sudden change in the way they're seeing the property market? Well, here we go. Record migration, low listings, and tight rental markets have combined to ignite recovery in the housing market, despite rising interest rates, prompting Westpac and ANZ to revise their forecast. Now, mind you, I do believe that both banks are still very conservative in what they're expecting for the property market. And remember, when you buy property, you don't just buy in a city, you buy in individual suburbs, and there are bound to be suburbs that will totally exceed what the average growth rate is expected to be around Australia going forward. So there are some great opportunities right now, but let's keep going. After just a 9% decline in capital city housing prices over the past year, the recent upturn has come as a surprise to us, said Felicity Emmett, ANZ senior economist. Low levels of supply and stronger than expected demand look to have trumped the impact of higher mortgage rates over recent months. New listings are 20% below the 5-year average, and total listings are at their lowest since 2010. So people are just not putting their homes up for sale. At the same time, we have an incredibly tight rental market that's probably pushing some people from that market into the home buyer market. We also have record rates of immigration, which all combined to more than offset those higher interest rates. So what does that all mean in simple English? Well, essentially it means that many mortgage holders who are thinking of selling their homes have chosen not to because they're scared they won't get the price that they want, reducing supply. It also shows that these predictions about people having to fire sell their home were totally off base. Secondly, you have a massive undersupply just in general in the property market. And with all that excess demand out there, especially from rising immigration, basically the economic fundamentals of demand being higher than supply are proving to be a more powerful force than any sort of fear-mongering about higher interest rates. But now that we know that property prices are starting to rise, now that we know that these higher interest rates are not having the impact that many fear-mongers had, now we're starting to see a new objection, a new reason why people will tell you not to invest into the property market, and that this recovery is only short term when almost all the experts and all the economic fundamentals point this to be a long-term sustainable recovery. So what is this new reason that so many doomsday folk are coming up with? Here it is. And I actually first noticed it when someone placed the following comment under one of my recent videos. No, you are off. The market will keep sinking and then collapse. It has a long way to go down. It's not even close to the bottom. House prices are still too far out of reach compared to wages. It can never balance out without a huge pop. And all these people saying it will settle and go back up again are wrong. Now, when you hear arguments like this, sometimes they might seem like they make sense. I mean, we know that house price growth has been far above wage price growth, and that will certainly continue. So then, does that mean that if the average person can't afford property prices, then property prices need to fall? Well, the first thing you've got to ask yourself is, well, what's going to make them fall, right? We've just had 10 interest rate rises and property prices are now starting to rise. And remember, when property prices start to rise, that means more people are getting new home loans because there are buyers in the market. And when buyers go and get a home loan, remember, they're being qualified. So the bank's only giving them the loan if when they assess their borrowing capacity, they feel that they can afford the loan if interest rates were to rise 2.5% to 3%, right? Now, there's no one out there expecting interest rates to rise 2.5% to 3%. There might not even be any further interest rate rises. Maybe there might be one, which is going to be another 0.25%, right? So it's not going to hurt anyone any more, at least any of these new buyers. So that's not going to affect mortgage holders and force them to sell. So then what's going to force property prices to fall? It just isn't going to happen. But then let me address the other part of the argument about how house prices are out of reach of average wages, which actually is true. But it's still not going to crash the market, and for this simple reason. Okay, so on the whiteboard we have a very simple drawing. Red circles and black circles. Every red circle represents 10,000 houses. Every black circle represents 10,000 people. Okay, so we've got 10 red circles, so 10 times 10,000 is 100,000 houses, and for 100,000 people. If this was the case in Australia, where we had an equal number of houses for the number of people wanting or needing accommodation, then the argument about property prices needing to be reachable and attainable by people on the average wage would make sense. But that's not the case in Australia. In Australia, we have a supply shortage. There are more people who need properties than properties that are available. So that's why the average wage argument doesn't work. I mean, have a look at this. Let's imagine that there are now 60,000 houses available for 100,000 people who are looking. So I've got 6 circles here for houses, 10 circles for people. What this means is that then for property prices to rise, all that needs to happen is that the top 60,000 households need to be on an income level where these property prices are now affordable for them. But what it then means is that because of the supply shortages, the 40,000 households that don't meet this income threshold, they just won't be able to afford property. But that won't stop property prices rising. Now, I'm not saying this is the way it should be. I'm not saying we don't have a social problem. I'm not saying that the government hasn't made so many stuff ups in terms of putting us into this housing crisis. What I am saying is simply this. This is why property prices are rising, because we don't have enough properties in Australia for everybody who wants to buy or everybody who wants to rent. And that means that as long as we have enough people on a high enough income bracket to afford property prices in that area, property prices will rise, regardless of the fact that the average wage earner or the household on average income may not be able to afford property prices. So therefore, as more and more people come into Australia and some of them squeeze into this bracket, squeezing some of these people out of this ability to afford property prices, prices are going to rise because demand is higher than supply. And that's why with these supply shortages that we're seeing right now, with more confidence around interest rate movements, this shift in market direction as property prices continue to rise to the surprise of so many, especially banking economists, it's here to stay. It's going to be a recovery in many areas in 2023, but some areas, they're going to grow very, very quickly. And if you want help to work out how do you find those best areas, click the link in my description to get a copy of my book, both the audio version and the digital version, totally for free. And then make sure you subscribe to see more videos like this. I'll see you next time.